Right, so has Israel's beloved Iron Dome defense system gone somewhat rusty? It was reported yesterday in the Israeli news outlet Israel Hayom that a strike by Hezbollah on the Israeli settlement of Kiryat Shmona was successful because the Iron Dome just didn't get triggered. Are the forces of the so-called axis of resistance finding ways to avoid triggering the Israeli defense system then, or is it just failing more generally? And if so, how is that happening? Why is it happening? And actually, when you dig into it a bit more, you realise that although this particular strike garnered some attention from the media, it's hardly the first time the Iron Dome has failed. So is it simply a case of it's not all it's cracked up to be, not what it has been sold to the world as, or has Israel simply invited so much by repercussion from so many different directions now that it simply can't cope anymore? Right, so Hezbollah, as they have been for a large part of the past 12 months since Israel's invasion of Gaza began following the night of October 7th, have been giving Israel a bit of a pasting, particularly in the north of the country, as you perhaps might expect, Lebanon being to the north of Israel after all, but also into the occupied Syrian territory of the Golan Heights just off to the east. As I'm writing this, it was being reported that more than 100 missiles have again been fired from Lebanon at the Israeli northern settlement of Kiryat Shmona, where yesterday it was also attacked, and it seems the Iron Dome defense system completely failed to be triggered, let alone intercept any of those incoming rockets. Here's an excerpt from the Cradle's coverage of that. According to the Israeli military, about 20 rockets were launched from Lebanon towards Kiryat Shmona and the surrounding area. Shrapnel from the rockets killed 2 Israelis, while sirens were also activated due to a false alert of a potential drone attack. Fire and rescue services said several buildings caught fire after being struck by rockets. Fires are raging in multiple buildings to sustain direct hits, and firefighters are working to contain the spread while searching for victims, said Incident Commander-Chief Reshef Dror Buchnik. Israel launched a major bombing campaign on Lebanon on the 23rd of September that killed over 1,000 people and assassinated many Hezbollah leaders and commanders, including the resistance movement's Secretary-General Hassan Nasrallah. However, Hezbollah continues to fire rockets at targets in northern Israel, including at the cities of Haifa and Tel Aviv. Hezbollah ground forces have also repelled ongoing efforts by Israeli ground troops to enter Lebanon. Now, it has to be borne in mind that Kiryat Shmona is a civilian area. It is the northernmost city in Israel, therefore the most vulnerable to Hezbollah attacks. And I'm minded to think that the assassination of Hassan Nasrallah, who was seen as a pragmatic voice within Hezbollah, and Netanyahu also celebrating these killed the likely successors of Nasrallah as well now too, is just making Hezbollah, as well trained and armed as they are, vastly different kettle of fish to Hamas, they're much more powerful, has had the effect of letting Hezbollah off the leash somewhat. They fired 20 missiles at Kiryat Shmona yesterday, none of which were intercepted, and it's now being reported they fired another 100 plus. Success one day has led to them increasing their attack 5-fold today, it seems, on the same area, civilian area. Now, I've no idea at this point if the Iron Dome worked this time, it's too early to say, but certainly Hezbollah are thinking it's worth striking again because it didn't yesterday, seems to be the logic. At the moment, and perhaps not unsurprisingly, Israel aren't very forthcoming about why the Iron Dome didn't respond. But this isn't the first time it hasn't delivered. And of course, another thing to bear in mind is that although Israel have claimed for a long time that their Iron Dome defense system is 99% accurate, they did of course evacuate some 100,000 people from the north of the country due to Hezbollah beginning attacks as Israel moved into Gaza. If you listen to the IDF on such matters, though, they'll tell you it was all to allow the IDF to have more operational freedom in the area. Yeah, okay. That's going well for you then, isn't it? Now, one plausible explanation, I suppose, is the closer to aggressive border settlements are in Israel, the less reaction time there is for the Iron Dome to respond to them. Kiryat Shmona is mere miles from the Lebanese border. Perhaps there was very little time to respond. Well, the Iron Dome has responded to Kiryat Shmona strikes previously, and Iron Dome batteries are positioned nearby and in the Golan Heights as well. So that really oughtn't to be an issue. You'd imagine Israel would have thought of that anyway, wouldn't you? Earlier this year, we saw a spate of fires break out across northern Israel. Summer, which got very, very dry, prompted even more evacuations as Hezbollah rocket fire caused all these fires, and they were burning out of control in a lot of areas. Yet again, the Iron Dome was not being triggered either, which led then to speculation that Lebanon had found a way to evade the Israeli defences. But another part of that story is that perhaps it's still relevant, actually, is that we know the Iron Dome defence system has not been running at 100% in the north of Israel anyway. Hezbollah managed to destroy 2 of the Iron Dome's batteries last December, and it isn't clear if these have been replaced because they are astonishingly expensive. They are $50 million apiece, these Iron Dome batteries. They are incredibly costly, as are the materials to repair them, as well as all the replacement interceptor missiles and components to do with them, because they are obviously expendables used every time the system reacts. They've become even more scarce the longer the atrocities in Gaza have continued, because it means Israel is being spread more thinly, especially now they're engaging on 8 fronts as it is. And they've only got Netanyahu and his government to blame for that, of course. So the Iron Dome defences are also having to intercept a lot of ordnance being fired by those other than Hamas and Hezbollah, with Iraqi resistance increasing their attacks. Israel was attacked by attacking Syria again last night with strikes on Damascus. They will have strikes back from Syria in return. The Houthis in Yemen can now reach Israel themselves, whereas back at the time of these northern Israeli fires, they couldn't. And although there are other defence systems Israel has to employ aside from the Iron Dome, it's the Iron Dome itself that doesn't seem to be cutting it at this moment in time. And therefore, how much longer can the other defence systems, such as the Arrow long-range defence system, hold up as well? So another possible explanation is that the Iron Dome is simply becoming overstretched, and all the more so, the more of its batteries get taken out and the more groups fire upon Israel in retaliation for Israeli attacks on them. Have more of these Iron Dome batteries been taken out in the time since, rather than consider whether they've been replaced? Things could be getting even worse. Maybe things have got to that point. It's probably fair to say it's getting that way. Where Israel are now having to make decisions about what they are going to do about Lebanon constantly committing these rocket attacks on them to disrupt the IDF's aims in Gaza, and now their aims regarding invasion of Lebanon itself. And when I say that, are they making choices now about whether or not to deploy the Iron Dome to defend certain settlements at all? Given they have been talking of returning people to the north, given Netanyahu's rhetoric about Lebanon turning on Hezbollah, and that if they don't, he'll turn Lebanon into another Gaza, that statement, all of a sudden, in light of everything else I've spoken about here, has a ring of desperation to it. The other side to this is the fact that if replacement of Iron Dome defences is required, Israel can't do it themselves anyway. Certainly they can't pay for it because their economy is absolute toast. It's the public purse of the US population that pays for all this constantly. So to my mind, and I very much doubt Israel will admit to any of this anyway, is that they're simply running out of firepower, either the interceptor missiles used or the Iron Dome batteries themselves, and the system has been overwhelmed and simply cannot be maintained as it was. As such, we'll see more claims concerning the failure of the Iron Dome, and it being unclear why, according to Israeli sources. But ultimately, if they've no rockets to fire, the system has been rendered completely useless, and I genuinely think Israel is running out of juice for their defence systems, and that is what we're seeing. It's the only explanation that makes sense for the increasing frequency of the Iron Dome's failure. They simply can't respond to every attack, or possibly even more sinister to think about is they are choosing to protect some areas of Israel over others because of shortages. And they only, again, have themselves to blame. Get out of Gaza, get out of Lebanon, end your occupation of all occupied territories as demanded by the International Court of Justice. Nothing less will do. Reinforcing how much trouble Israel are in here, though, combined with how deaf to such concerns Benjamin Netanyahu is the fact the US have now resorted to trying to bribe him to not target certain Iranian sites. It's wet as wet can be that they offer free weapons and free diplomatic cover rather than just pull all of that instead and leave them to their own devices. But there we are. That's US foreign policy as far as Israel goes, isn't it? Give them what they want, hope they see sense, but it's Benjamin Netanyahu. Seeing sense is irrelevant, but his grip on power is the only thing that ever concerns him. Get all the details of that story in this video recommendation here as your suggested next watch. I'll hopefully catch you on the next vid. Cheers, folks.